Welcome to this special Vectric live session with me, Becky. We hope that you're all staying well and safe. Now this week I'm going to show you how to create a two-part textured house name number sign. So just like the one that you can see on the screen here. So the idea is that we cut this out in two parts. So we've got the base of the sign and we have the individual numbers. And so these numbers will basically slot in to the pockets on our textured sign, enabling us to use different materials, or we could simply paint the numbers to stand out from the sign itself. So I'm going to show you how quick you can create this textured background just by using the powerful vector texture tool and a simple profile pass. Now textures are a quick way to add the wow factor to any sign or to use on its own for textured wall panels. So I am going to be on hand. If you're watching this live, please ask questions in the chat thread and I'll be happy to answer those. For those of you that are watching this after this show has gone live, then please feel free to enter in your questions in the comments section and I'll be sure to answer those too. Okay, so let's start by opening up a new session. So we're going to start by creating a new file. So we're going to go and create a new file and we're going to work with a single-sided job. So here we're going to put in a width of 12 inches, a height of 8 inches and a material thickness of ½ inch. Okay, and we'll just set the Z0 position to the material surface and we'll stick our XY in the lower left-hand corner and then we could go ahead and press OK. So just before we get into the actual project itself, we're just going to talk a bit about the vector texture tool, which I spoke about earlier. So you can access the vector texture tool in the drawing tab, and it is this icon here. Okay, so under create vectors, second row, last icon, vector texture, which enables us to create repeating vector texture patterns. And if we click on that, that will open up the create vector texture form where we have a series of options that we can interchange to eventually create our textures. Okay, so to start with, we are going to look at the settings within this form and really looking at how when you make changes to different parts of the form, it affects the resulting vector texture. So to start with, let's just go ahead and press preview and see the resulting texture based on the settings that we've got here within this form. Right then, so we'll start at the top, okay? So we've got an angle selector, okay? At the moment it is at 0 degrees, which is why we're seeing this kind of horizontal pattern. If we change that to 90 and then just go ahead and press preview, you can see we now have this vertical pattern. Not only can we type this in, we can also use the slider, press preview, slide again, preview, and you can just tinker with this until you're happy with the result of the preview. Okay, so that's the angle. Next up, we've got line spacing. So we specify a maximum line spacing, so that's the space in between each one of the vector lines that are created. So we could have a max spacing of 1, for instance, and then go ahead and press preview. Okay, so the distance between each one of those vectors is going to be 1 inch. What we can also do is apply variation, so we vary the distance from 0 to 1 inch being the maximum. So if we just use the slider there and press preview, you can see the result of that. So you can see here these two vectors are much closer together than, let's say, these two vectors. And again, you can just continuously alter the variation until you are happy with the resultant pattern. Okay, so that's line spacing and variation. Next up, we've got wave parameters. So here we're really talking about the amplitude and the wavelength here. So the amplitude is the height of the wave. Okay, so this is, at the moment we've got it at 2. If we just increase that to 4 and preview that, you can see we've got much higher waves in there. And then if we just reduce that right down and then go ahead and press preview, you can see that the waves are much shallower. So over to the left, so at 0, you're going to get basically a straight line. The lower you are, the shallower your wave, the higher amplitude is, the higher the actual wave it is itself. Right then, so that's amplitude. So then we have wavelength, okay? So this is the actual length between the waves. So as it stands, it's at 4. If we just increase that to 8, you can see we've got much longer waves in here. And then if we reduce that right down, say to 1, you can see that the wavelengths are actually much less and much closer together. And the really nice thing about this form is that you can just alter and tweak between the settings and just press preview until you're happy with what you see in here. So another option we've got here is noise. Okay, so at the moment we have nice smooth waves. If we apply some noise to that, it does what it says really. It just creates this noise, so we no longer have that smooth shape that we once did. If we go and preview that, and then if we just take the noise out of there, preview that, we're back to a nice smooth wave. And finally, if you wanted to, you could place the vector texture on a particular layer. So you just use the check option here to place vectors on the layer and give that a name, and it'll put those vectors onto that layer. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the Create Vector Texture tool. If you want to know more about this, you can take a look at the documentation. So have a look at this question mark here, click on that, that'll open up your browser, and it basically tells you all you need to know about this tool. If you want to watch some videos, there is an excellent video. If you go to the Vectric website, go to Community, Training Videos, into Aspire, and if you go to the vector drawing section, there is a video here called Vector Textures, and that basically walks through all you need to know about the vector texture tool, the different sorts of things that you can create using that. Okay, so we'll just close that out, and then we'll just go back into VCarve, where we'll start to create the actual house sign project. Okay, so we're just going to cancel out of here. So we're going to start by creating the basic shapes that form our house sign. So I'm going to go over and we're going to draw an ellipse. Okay, so I'm going to snap to the center point. So because I've got my snap settings switched on, I'm able to locate the dead center of my job space. You can see the dotted line here, so I'm now snapping to the center there, in which case I can just go ahead and we can stretch out an oval, give that a little bit of height in here, so just make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so something like this looks okay, so we'll go with that as our basic shape, and then we can close out. So now what we want to do is create an offset, 2 offsets to create the actual border itself for our sign. So with that selected, we're going to come over to the drawing tab. We're going to look at this tool here, Offset Selected Vectors. So I want to create a copy of this that's offset outside of our existing ellipse, so we're going to use the outwards option. So I need to specify a distance, so in this case I'm going to go with 1/4 of an inch. And we'll use the select new option, so it selects the newly created vector once we hit this offset button. Okay, so that's that there. Okay, so that's that vector. Then I'd like to offset this vector out also. This time we'll do that by 1/2 inch. Go ahead and press offset, close out, and there we have it. So we've got 1, 2, 3 ellipse vectors there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at creating a vector texture, but I want to limit that texture to this vector here. So to do that, we just simply select our vector, and we'll go back into the vector texture tool. Now if I just alter my settings in here, so we're going to go with 0 degrees in here, so we want to keep that horizontal. And then we're going to go with a max spacing. So here I'm going to look at using a 1/4 inch spacing. Now for the actual tool that I'm going to use, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch ball nose, so I'm going to make the spacing 1/4 inch between each one of those vectors. So we'll go with a 1/4 inch spacing, and then the variation, okay, so we're actually going to put that to 0. I don't want a randomized variation between each one of those waves. Then we go on to the wave parameters. So for the amplitude, I'm just going to go with a fairly shallow 1 inch there, and then the wavelength, we're going to go kind of stretch that out. We'll try 6. And then I can just simply go ahead and preview that. Okay, so that's the effects we're getting there. Okay, so we've got nice long shallow waves, happy with that. So we're going to place those vectors on a layer. I'm just going to give that a name. We're just going to call this one texture, and then just preview that just to finalize it, and then we can simply OK that. Okay, so that's pretty much the texture in place. Next up, we can now put in our house number or our house name for our house sign. So to do that, we're going to use the Draw Text tool. Now before we do that, let's just go to our layers bar at the top here. We're just going to undraw the visibility of our texture. Click on layer 1, that makes it the active layer, so that anything that I create now will be added to this layer. Okay, so let's go into the Draw Text tool, click on that, and that will open up our Create Text box. Okay, so here you can see in the 2D view that I'm able to see how big the text will potentially be when we start to type something in there. I can move that around, so I can position it to wherever I like. We'll just put it there for now. We can select a font, so here this just pulls out all the fonts that you've got installed on your machine. In this case I am going to go for this font here, and then simply enter in your house name or number in this text bar here. So in this case let's just go for a nice grand number of 100. Okay, I'm happy with that, so we can simply close out. Then what we can do is we can look at adjusting the spacing. So you can see the 1 and the 0, there's quite a large gap in between the two characters there. So let's just look at bringing those closer together. So to do that, let's use this tool here, Edit Text Spacing and Curve. And I can simply click in between the two characters that I'd like to bring together. We can see the two arrows pointing at each other. And if I click, you'll see that with every click, it's actually bringing the two characters closer together. Okay, so something like that looks pretty good. So to exit out of this mode, just simply go into the edit options and then just go back into normal selection mode. Okay, so that's our 100 number there. Select that. I'm just going to press F9 just to put that in the dead center of our job. Now, in order to hang this sign, I'm going to create 2 pilot holes either side of the sign itself. So to help me draw this up, we're just going to draw a polyline. I'm just going to snap from the end point here to the end point here. So just keeping that in line horizontally there, right click to come out. Then we're going to draw a circle. So I'm just going to go with a diameter of 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to find the midpoint there. So you can see, thanks to this smart snapping, I'm able to snap to the center point of that line, in which case I can click and you can see that it's entered that there for me. So we can close out, take our kind of guideline here, just delete it. Then we can take this pilot hole and then go over into the mirror tool. We're going to flip that about the job center. We're going to create a mirrored copy because we want one to go on the right hand side as well. So we're going to use the option here to flip horizontal. Close out, and there we have our pilot holes. So if we just switch on the texture layer, we pretty much have everything here ready to go to create our toolpaths. So let's go ahead and switch over to the toolpaths tab. So the first thing we need to do is check over our material setup. So we're working with a thickness of 1/2 inch. XY datum position is in the lower left hand corner. We're setting the Z0 off the material surface. And then we just want to check over the rapid Z gaps, home start position, ensuring that everything is safe and appropriate. Once we're happy with that, we can go ahead and press OK. So the first toolpath we're going to look at is creating the texture. So to do that, we're going to select the texture vectors, and then we're going to go and run a simple profile toolpath. So here we need to specify a start depth and a cut depth. So we're starting this at 0, and then we're cutting down to a depth of 1/8 of an inch. So just a nice shallow 1/8 inch in there. Then what we're going to do is we need to select a tool. So I am using a 1/2 inch ball nose to machine this. Okay, so to select a tool, you can just simply press select and you can enter or select a tool from the tool database. Okay, so we're actually going to machine on the vectors. So the center of the tool is going to run on each one of these texture vectors. And then we can give that a name. We'll just call this one profile texture, and then go ahead and press calculate, and then we can preview that. We can see the result of that there. Okay, so you can see how effective the vector texture tool is with just using a nice big ball nose tool at a shallow depth, and you'll get this really nice looking pattern there. Okay, so you're probably thinking what's going on up here. Don't worry about that. We're actually going to clean that up next. So if we just tile our windows so we can see the 2D and the 3D view, close out, then we're going to select this vector here. So this vector, we're going to basically run another profile pass on this using the same tool. So with that vector, we're going to go into the profile toolpath. This time we're going to cut it a little bit deeper, so cutting down 1/4 of an inch here. Again, we're going to use that 1/2 inch ball nose, and we're also going to machine that on the vector as well. And if we go ahead and give that a name, so we'll just call that one profile border, press calculate, and then we could go ahead and preview that, and we can see we've got a nice border, and it's just chopped away at all of the areas where the tool has come in and out when creating the texture around the edge of this sign. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So it looks really nice little contemporary pattern there. Right then, so we can put that in Z. So next up, we're going to create the pocket for our number. So as I mentioned in the intro, we are going to create our sign as a 2-part process. So we're going to machine the numbers separately in a different material, and those numbers are going to slot into pockets that we're going to machine into this sign. That way we can use contrasting material, we could paint it up, and it can also be raised from the texture itself. So to do that, we're going to just close out of this preview. We're going to select our number. Okay, so there's our 100. And the way we're going to do this is by using the inlay toolpath. Okay, so if we click on that, we need to specify what type of inlay this is. Now, this is the female part that we're creating, the actual pocket. So here we have the option to create a pocket or a hole. Now, we don't want to cut all the way through this, so we're going to use the pocket option. So here we need to specify our start depth. So the start depth for this is going to be at 0. Cut depth for this, we are going to cut down 1/4 of an inch. So we've got 1/4 of an inch in there. And then we need to select a tool. So if we use the select option, we can specify a tool. So we're going to go with a 1/4 inch end mill, and we're going to machine this in an offset strategy. Now, as the whole point of this is so that we create a pocket so that the individual numbers can be cut out separately, and we want those to slot into the pockets. Now, anything where we are slotting parts together, we should really consider creating an allowance. So this is just simply where we can create an overcut. So we're overcutting the pocket by a very small amount, just to give yourself a little bit of an allowance so that the parts can actually slot in nicely, so they're not too tight and that you can't actually get the parts in, but you don't want to make your allowance too big so that the parts move around. So from past experience, I find that an allowance of negative 0.005 does the trick. However, it's always good to create test cuts beforehand. So I'm going with this value here. It's just going to be called pocket inlay, and we can simply go ahead and press calculate. Okay, we're just going to take a look at the 2D view, where we're going to look at the solid preview here. And if we just maximise the 2D view, we can take a look at what we've got there. Okay, so what the inlay toolpath does is it takes our vectors and the tool, so the radius of the tool, the diameter of the tool, and it creates the pocket for us. And the reason why we're using the inlay tool as opposed to the pocket toolpath is because when we come to create the male counterparts, the actual cutout numbers, it's going to create the same pattern. Now, if we was to do that with a profile pass instead, we would get these sharp corners, and these sharp corners aren't going to be very useful for us when we're trying to slot this number into a inlay pocket that looks like this. So that's why you want to use the inlay toolpath as opposed to creating a pocket and a profile toolpath. Okay, so let's go into the 3D view, and then we could just go ahead and preview that. I'm just going to change the toolpath colour here to be black, so that what we can do then is we can try and simulate it as if we was painting the numbers black when they slot in, or if we are using black material, say corian for example, we can get more of an idea of how that would look. So if we go ahead and preview that, okay, so that's what that looks like. So it comes down 1/4 of an inch, like so. Right then, so that's pretty much the inlay part of that. So next up, we can take a look at creating the pilot holes. So let's close out here. I'm going to select this circle, shift and select that circle. This time I'm just going to use a VCarve toolpath. All I want to do is just literally just mark in holes as to where I know where I need to drill, where it's perfectly aligned in the center of our final cutout. So here we're just going to go the 90° 1/2 inch B-bit, calculate that, preview it, and you can see it just creates these 2 points for us, which is perfect. Okay, next up we can close out, and then we can just run a final cutout pass. So we've got this vector here. We're going to use the profile toolpath. So the tool we're going to use is a 1/4 inch end mill. Select that. We're going to cut all the way through our material. So Z equals will come up with the value that you entered as your material thickness within your job setup form. And so it's entered that 1/2 inch value in there. I'm going to machine that on the outside. I'm going to assume that I've got a good hold down method. Say for example we've got a vacuum system, or we're using double-sided tape. That'll just mean that I don't need to apply any tabs to this toolpath, and then we can just go ahead, call that one profile cut out, and then simply go ahead and calculate that, preview it, double click on the waste material, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so there we have our one part of our sign. So all we need to do now is create a separate file to cut out the numbers for our sign. So to do that, let's just simply select our number, okay, right click, and then just use the copy option. Then we'll go ahead and open a new session of VCarve, create a new file. So this time I'm going to go 6x4. Material thickness I'm working with is actually 0.35 inches. Okay, then we can go ahead and press OK, right click, press paste, press F9 to center that, and there is the 100. Switch over to the toolpath tab. As always, check for your material setup, ensuring it's safe and appropriate. And then we're going to take that 100 and we are going to use the inlay toolpath. Okay, we're not using the profile toolpath, we're using the inlay toolpath. This time we're going to use the male side, so I'm creating a straight male inlay. Okay, so cutting all the way through our material, and we want to make sure that we use the exact same tool that we used to create the female counterpart. If you don't, this is not going to work, it's not going to slot together, as it relies on the tool's diameter to bring the two parts together. Okay, so that's simple as that. Just go ahead and press calculate, and then we can simply preview that. And I'll just cut that out, assuming again we've got a good hold down system. If not, you can just simply add in tabs, and there is the 100 cut out. In terms of machining, make sure you machine this part first. And the reason for that is once you've got your male inlay, you can simply then cut the female part, but when you create the pocket part, you can actually slot those numbers in just to check that they fit, and if they don't, then that's where you'll come in here and just simply adjust your allowance. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this session on creating a textured sign for your house. And if you do have any questions, then simply ask us in the live chat. I will be sticking around for a while to answer your questions there. Once it gets to the end of the video, then the live chat will cut out, but if you do have any more questions, please feel free to comment on the video and I can answer from there. So to download this project, simply head over to your V&Co account. We'll link you up in the video description so you can get that. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then please hit the subscribe button to get the latest information on the videos that we'll be releasing. Thank you for watching, happy making, and most importantly, stay safe everyone.